Can you tell if your sugar goes high after eating without getting a test done? I got asked this question just this past week and the answer is yes. And in today's video, we are going to discuss certain habits, feelings, and signs that your sugar is going high after you eat. Now, before we get into those, let's first talk about why it matters that your sugar goes up after eating, right? Well, two main things. One is if your sugar is high in your blood after eating, right? Sugar, of course, is energy. High sugar in your blood means that this sugar or energy is not getting to the cells of your body. And so your cells will be starving for energy, which is why they call diabetes starvation in the midst of plenty. You have a lot of energy circulating in your bloodstream, but it's not going to where it is needed. So that's one thing. Now, the second thing is, okay, maybe your cells are getting energy, but having high sugar in your blood means that the energy is coming in too fast. You're getting too much energy or too much sugar coming in too quickly. And so the cells get what they need, but there's still an excess of this energy, an excess of the sugar. And so it's lurking in your blood, circulating in your blood for a while before it ends up being packaged and then essentially or eventually stored as fat by your liver, because your liver is responsible for packaging all the energy from your food and then distributing it to all the cells all around the body where it's needed, okay? And so if you have an excess, right, then it just has to be stored. The liver has no choice but to say, oh my goodness, like there's so much energy coming, there's probably more coming, let me store this away. So this is why it matters when you have high sugar after you eat, high sugar in your bloodstream, right? You don't want that situation. Either you're starving in the midst of plenty, the cells aren't getting what they need, or you have an excess and the liver has no choice but to scramble and store that excess as fat. Now, what are some of the signs? How can you tell that this is happening to you, that your sugar is going up? And for some people, and I'm not encouraging you to not go and get a test, absolutely go and get a test. Everybody should have at least one test for of their blood sugar, and ideally once a year, or you might want to get your blood sugar tested. But the reality for some people is either they have no access to a lab near where they live or a hospital, so they're not able to get the test, or maybe there's access but they don't have any money and they don't know the resources or areas that they can go to get a test without having to pay. Or for some of you, it might just be that you don't think this matters to you, you don't think this applies to you, so you have access to a lab, you can go and get a blood test, but you think, oh, I'm totally fine and I don't need to worry about this. But listen up, because you might just notice one of these habits, feelings, or signs in yourself, and this might tell you, oh, urgently you need to go and get a test because maybe you're having a problem, right? So first we're going to talk about some harmful habits that might be causing your sugar to go high after you eat, right? And one of these is snacking, just non-stop snacking. You can't stop snacking, especially sweets and a lot of those processed foods like chips and biscuits and cookies and so on, okay? Another harmful habit is eating mainly fast food or just processed food, those easy dinners, microwave meals, and so on. If most of your meals, your main meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then the snacks in between are these fast foods, processed foods, then most likely your sugar could be going high after you eat, right? And then another one of the habits as well, harmful habits, is drinking a lot of sweetened beverages in between your meals. So you have your meals, maybe you have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and maybe some snacks in between, but also in between eating, you're drinking a lot of sweetened beverages, either juice, even if it's fruit juice, or sodas, or sweet tea, anything sweet. Now, the problem with these harmful habits is that all of them will cause the actual sugar levels, the glucose levels in your blood to go up. All these are foods that are very rapidly broken down, rapidly digested, and rapidly absorbed into your system. And because of this rapid absorption, you have a rapid rise in your blood sugar level. Now let's go to faltering feelings, all right? What are some of the feelings that might indicate that your sugar is going high right after you eat, right? So one of them is just feeling strong sugar cravings, or just frequent or almost constant cravings for something sweet. You can't stop eating. Even when you're not hungry, you just must have something sweet. And I had a patient actually just the other day who had a problem. His wife was the one who revealed that to us. She said just kept having sweet things. I know he was actually diabetic, but could not stop having sweet things. Even after eating, he just craved sweets constantly. Another feeling is after you eat now, you have this plunge, a post-meal plunge. Your energy drops, you're tired, you're sluggish, you're sleepy, and this is happening after all your main meals. You just can't hold up, right? Another feeling is early hunger. So you eat your meal and you're satisfied after your meal, but barely 2-3 hours later, you're starving. You're so very hungry just soon after eating your meals, right? And then the fourth, which kind of ties into the third of these feelings, right, is jitteriness. So, but I mention it separately because some of you may notice outright hunger. 2-3 hours later, you're like hungry. You can hardly keep, a well-balanced meal is supposed to last you for a good 5 hours. So it shouldn't be that you need to eat every 2-3 hours, but your main meals should be every 5 hours approximately, plus or minus an hour, right? But other than feeling hungry early after a meal, you might not notice hunger, but instead you might notice jitteriness or nervousness or anxiousness, and you might have diagnosed yourself with anxiety, or maybe a doctor might actually have diagnosed you with anxiety because you just frequently throughout the day get these spurts of jitteriness and nervousness and anxiousness. And for some of you, you might relieve that anxiety by having something sweet, but again, you're not tying it together. You're not tying that jitteriness and anxiety with the fact that, oh, my blood sugar dropped and that is why I'm needing something sweet to pick me up, and I feel like I'm medicating my anxiety with a sweet treat or so, but it's actually that you're medicating low blood sugar. And all these feelings, right, that we mentioned, the sugar cravings, the post-meal plunge, the early hunger, and then of course the jitteriness, all these three features share the fact that it's because the sugar goes low. And the sugar goes low because when it went really high, right, and you had that real high, right, and this is relative of course, but when your sugar got high after eating, your body did what it had to do to bring the sugar down, but it came down too low, and that low, right, which might not be dangerously low, but it's relatively low compared to how high it was, that coincides with these feelings, right? Because these feelings are to get you to have something to bring the levels back up to normal. Unfortunately, the levels might actually go up high, and so you have this cycle throughout the day of highs, lows, and you think you're anxious, you think you need some kind of medication for anxiety, you think you're having panic attacks, but it's just because of these fluctuations in sugar. And then third features, some subtle signs, right, that your sugar goes high after you eat. And one is you just struggle with weight woes. You just cannot seem to lose weight, right? Or maybe you're even gaining weight steadily year after year. You're just constantly gaining weight, okay? That might be an indication that your sugar is going up a bit after your meals. Second is your waist, right? Waist warning signs. So essentially your waist should be smaller than your hips, and there's a ratio for that, and I'm not gonna get into that, but just roughly speaking, if your waist size is almost the same as your hip size, that's a problem. Even worse, if your waist is larger than your hips. Roughly speaking, and it varies depending on different races and so on, but roughly speaking, men should not have a waist size of more than 40 inches, and women should not have a waist size of more than 35 inches. Roughly speaking, I said, right? But because that's so kind of inaccurate and there are variations between races, there's this waist hip circumference. But suffice it to say, you can find it. I mean, for a woman, the waist to hip ratio should be less than 0.8, and for a man, the waist to hip ratio should be less than 0.9. But just to keep it simple, if you take a string or a piece of cloth, long piece of cloth, and you put it around your waist, right, that waist length should be less than the hip length, okay? And then the third, in terms of subtle signs, are some skin signs, right? So I mentioned this pretty frequently, but essentially you might notice a darkening of the skin on the sides and at the back of your neck, sometimes at the front too, but mainly the sides and the back, because it's areas of friction, like with your clothing, and the skin is darkened and has a sort of velvety appearance, and you may see some grooves and so on in that skin, and it's thickened as well, okay? Or you might notice, and this may also be under the arms, or at the sides of the arms, and also in the groin as well. So areas of friction, you notice that. In these same areas as well, you might notice skin tags, right? So these are fleshy bits of skin that are sort of hanging off, and they might look like warts, but they're actually very fleshy, and it's just bits of skin that hang off in these areas, the neck, on the arms, the groin. And these are all these three signs, right? Signals, these subtle signals are all an indication now of high insulin levels, right? So we can see here the trend. In the beginning, we talked about harmful habits, and those, right, snacking, eating many fast foods, very processed foods, drinking lots of sweet drinks in between your meals, these all cause your sugar levels to go high, okay? Then when your sugar goes high, the body's response to get it down is to make or excrete or secrete rather insulin, right? But then if you keep secreting insulin throughout the day, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, eventually the insulin stays high, and those high insulin levels work on certain parts of the body, including these that you can see, the skin, where you have the darkened patches, the skin tags, and then the weight gain as well, because constantly high insulin levels will eventually cause you to put on weight, because having insulin high means that you're blocking the ability to burn fat, okay? And then your insulin goes high to work on this high sugar to bring it down, but then it comes down sometimes too low, and that's now when you get those faltering feelings of the cravings and the low energy and the early hunger, like you're getting hungry every 2 hours, and the jitteriness. This is now when your sugar drops because of the high insulin that came from the high sugar in the first place, right? So you can see how this all ties in, right? Now, these are just the signs of sugar going up after you eat, but then it comes back down and stays normal, which is why sometimes, you know, you might go for tests and you might have had multiple tests for sugar and they're all normal, because it depends on when you took that test or had that test in relation to your meals, which is why it's important to pay attention to these signs and symptoms and these habits, because a test might actually come back normal and you might have a false sense of security and still be wondering what's going on. Why am I like this, feeling like this, and experiencing these symptoms and so on and so forth, right? Now, other than the transient increase in your blood sugar after eating, well, what if your sugar stays high all the time, which then is officially diabetes, when your sugar is always high, even in the fasting state, even when you don't eat something. And the obvious signs now of diabetes, outright diabetes, would be extreme thirst. You're thirsty all the time, drinking lots of water. But for some, they're thirsty, but they don't drink water because you don't like water, which was me back in the day. And instead you drink juice, so you just compound the problem, right? And you passing urine a lot, urinating very frequently because your kidneys are trying to flush out that extra sugar that is in your blood, but then you're taking it more, so you're just urinating frequently. And then you might, if you're a man and you happen to urinate outside, and then you walk by that area later, you might see ants following your urine. That's how they used to diagnose diabetes in primitive times, okay? Or you might notice blurred vision or sensation of pins and needles in your fingertips and in your toes, or you might notice that if you get a cut or scratch or whatever, it takes forever to heal and it might even get infected. Or you might notice that you have frequent yeast infections, and these are not just regular yeast infections, these are severe yeast infections, which could be men or women in the genital area, hard to treat yeast infections, okay? So to conclude, so we went over all the signs, all the essentially the habits, feelings, and signs that your sugar may be going high after you eat your food. And it's super important to notice these habits, feelings, and signs as they can creep up on you. Okay, so these are things that happen slowly, incrementally, microscopically over time, and because they're happening so slowly, you don't notice them, and so it's just you normally, just a part of you normally getting, moving up in age, and you just think it's a normal aging process, right? But it really is something that's going on in your body, in your system, and how you process energy, okay? So again, like I said before, you should get a test. Everybody should get at least one test for diabetes, which is a fasting blood sugar test, or you can get an hemoglobin A1C test, which gives an idea of the concentration of blood sugar in your blood for a 3-month period. The reason why the A1C test can be a little misleading sometimes is because it's an average. So if you have a highs and then lows, the average of high and low is normal, right? So very misleading. If you're really able to, you have the finances, because a lot of times insurance doesn't cover it, you can get a fasting insulin test done, right? And insulin should be down to normal when you're not eating, because insulin is produced when you eat something and it's processing the food and the energy to get it into the cells, right? So if your insulin is high, above 5 really, but certainly above 10 in the fasting state, then you have a problem, and you probably need to be more aggressive with how you eat and so on and so forth, right? So get a test, either fasting insulin or A1C, or fasting blood sugar test. And in the meantime, while you wait for your test, to schedule a test or for your result, you should really start looking at where you're getting added sugar, how much added sugar you're getting, because you want to keep the added sugar amount to less than or equal to 6 teaspoons in a 24-hour period. 6 teaspoons, every 1 teaspoon is 1 teaspoon is 4 grams. That's how you're going to look at your packaged food labels. But really and truly, you want to really keep it close to zero, and whatever sugar you have should be sugar in its natural form, which would be sugar from your vegetables and your fruits and so on and so forth, right? Now, if you want to learn more about all this, because there's so much more to learn than I can go through in a 15-minute video, then you can join me next week from January 20th for the 5-day Control Your Blood Sugar Challenge. And this is not just a challenge, right? It's not just a class, but it's a challenge where you're going to be challenged to do certain things during that 5-day period, so you can start putting into practice what you learn, and then take that knowledge going forward to continue to improve your blood sugar levels, keep them nice and stable, and control your blood sugar. That's the challenge. So the link is going to be in the comments, and if it looks like something that would benefit you, or anybody that you know for that matter, you can let them know about it, and maybe I will see some of you on the Control Your Blood Sugar Challenge. Thank you for watching, and go and get that blood sugar test done. Take care. Bye.